Hello friends and welcome back to the Cigars channel. Today we have a very special guest with us, George Frakes of 1573 Cigars. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. It's fantastic to be here.
It's great to have you.
Fantastic to see you both.
And yourself.
And it's an honour to sit down with you, it always is.
Likewise. It's just great to share your knowledge and really learn from you because you've been in the industry for quite a while now, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I always say that I know nothing, but there is nothing I cannot learn. But I will say that I don't know about anything other than cigars. So,
I mean, that's not always a bad thing.
I've been in the industry a while. I started, once upon a time I was a professional musician.
Okay.
And I started smoking cigars when I was 16. It became like a ritual with a friend of mine.
Okay.
And then one day, after quite a few years of being a professional musician, another musician friend of mine said to me, "Look, George, why don't you come and work in a cigar shop?" So I thought, all right, I love cigars, I'll give this a go. And that was a place called Casa on Wardour Street in London. Now it's a really lovely little shop, it's now long gone, but I learned a lot of things at Casa. I immediately sort of had a fire that ignited within me, this like burning desire to know everything about every single cigar in the humidor. I had to know every little in and out, to my detriment sometimes. I do drive myself a bit mad.
I can imagine, there's a lot to know.
Yeah, you know yourselves, when you walk into a humidor and there's this huge array of amazing cigars, you want to know everything about them.
Yes, it can be overwhelming sometimes as well, can't it?
Yeah, it can.
Yeah, we always find with people that are new to the industry as well, when they walk into a humidor, there's thousands of cigars there, there's so much different things about each individual cigar, and you're like, you've got this wrapper leaf, this binder, this filler, and it changes throughout each individual one. So trying to understand that from sort of our point of view and your point of view, I mean, there's a lot to it, but it's one of them things, it's quite interesting.
Yeah. It's consuming in a really nice way.
Exactly.
Yes.
Not consuming like a virus, but consuming like a light within you that just gradually seeps outwards,
I like to see it as it turns a job into a hobby. That's the way I like to describe it. And I think that, it really makes sense for a lot of people who are in the industry. Because once you join the industry, you stay in the industry. I find with a lot of people.
It's one of them things that catches your attention straight away. It definitely did for myself. I mean, before we kind of got into this, I never really sat down, enjoyed any cigars or anything like that. And as soon as you kind of come into it and you understand all of the intricacies about the product itself, it kind of just grabs your attention and pulls you in.
Yeah.
And for me, it's grabbed me and pulled me in more than anything else ever has, really. So
yeah, it's quite amazing, isn't it? It really does grab your attention. So it's quite amazing because I learned that at Casa, right? And I learned that what cigars really mean to people as well. And that's a really interesting subject. Because you sit down with people, and you learn that cigars are that moment in that person's day of stillness. There's no knowledge that can bring you that.
no.
And there's something really humbling about that. It's something that you have to learn, but in a slightly more esoteric sense, a philosophical sense. And so after Casa, I moved on to James J. Fox on St. James's Street, because I had to be in a proper cigar shop like you guys have here. I had to be in a serious cigar shop. So I went there, and there I took care of the rare and vintage cigars. I did a lot of public speaking in places such as the House of Lords, and I also educated people, and still do, on cigars worldwide, cigar history, cigar agriculture, the cigars themselves, the cigar service.
Yeah, I feel like your knowledge is uncapped. I mean, it shocks us every time. I mean, every time you come here, you come out with all of these things, and down to the dates of when things were first established. Everything just kind of, you ask you a question, you seem to know the answer. And to us, that's like amazing, and obviously that's something that we thrive to sort of be.
Do you know what it is, right? And thank you, that's a really kind thing to say. Do you know what it is? It's actually something that the cigar itself has taught me in a way. Is that in such a world of like in such a world of incredible momentum, incredible physical movement, incredible mental demand, it's important to maintain a sense of stillness and peace within and contentment. You can maintain that constantly. There are many things that can teach you that. Meditation is the classic way of learning that. Exercise, good food, focus. But a cigar does it in quite a unique way. And cigars taught me that. So when learning, it's all about that absolute focus. And if you have that absolute focus, you form essentially quicker and stronger neural pathways, and essentially retain information slightly better. Not that I retain very much at all, to be honest with you. But yeah.
You say that to us, but honestly our memories are just like a goldfish, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, the amount of times we go through the same thing over and over again, even down to stock and things like that. It's like, oh yeah, you go down and check it and you get up the stairs and it's like, I forgot what I've done there. And then you have to go and double check and things like that. But
I do that. I do that.
I feel like that's a natural sort of human thing to do, right?
It is. Yeah. It is. Short-term memories for fools.
Exactly. That's what we're going to run with from now on.
Yeah. It is.
So after JJ Fox, where did you end up from there?
Well, then in 2020, a great friend of mine, Winston, came to me and he said, Winston's a professional musician, and he said to me, George, I love cigars. I smoke cigars all day, every day. I want to work with cigars. And so I said, all right, there's one man we have to speak to, and his name's Nick Melillo, of Foundation Cigars. And so then we got together with Nick, and we got on like a house on fire. So then, long story short, we realised that my personal favourite cigar brand and Winston and Damo, my fellow directors' favourite cigar brand, wasn't coming into the UK. So we thought we've got to sort this out. We've got to make this happen. And in 2022, that's what we did. We formed 1573 Cigars. And now what I do is, obviously, I help bring Foundation into the UK. And essentially, it's my goal to spread the word of Foundation, It's such a cult brand with a huge amount of passion and love behind it, and a huge amount of passion and love for it. That love just needs to be nurtured.
Yeah, of course.
And that's all I do.
I think you have done that wonderfully, and ever since we've met you and you've brought in the Foundation Cigars, like, I think it's safe to say for myself and yourself that we are just completely overwhelmed with how wonderful these blends are. As we're sampling the Tabernacle today, we're just sitting here absolutely thoroughly enjoying these, as we always do.
Yeah,
thank you.
And as you mentioned before, even down to the presentation of the cigars that Foundation produces, each and every single one is just perfect. There's not really anything bad you can say about them.
But shout out to Nick.
Shout out to Nick.
So thank you, Nick, for doing such a wonderful job.
And as I say,
thank you to yourself.
Thank you very much for actually bringing this brand to the UK market and allowing us to enjoy these cigars with you.
Well, thank you. I will say it's 99.9% Nick. But 0.1% me. But it's
that's enough.
Thank you.
Perfect. So 1573, as you say, is who you now represent and who you work with. Is there any specific reason as to why you chose 1573 Cigars as your sort of brand name?
Yeah, there is. Right. I have a tendency to go into the weeds as a historian, so I'll try and stay out of the weeds here. But there's a man called William Harrison, right? He was a Welsh priest. Well, it was England at the time, but he was a Welsh priest. And in the 1590s, he published a book called The Chronicles of England. Now, The Chronicles of England is really widely regarded as the greatest colloquial account of the 1500s in the UK. It chronicles many amazing things happening throughout that century. A lot of stuff happened. But something he particularly notes is the date that we first started smoking tobacco, which is 1573.
Okay.
In fact, I quote William Harrison's words. 1573, it is in these days that the taking in of the smoke of the Indian herb called tobacco by a little ladle, a little instrument formed like a little ladle, whereby it passeth from the mouth into the head and the lungs, against rheums and other such engendered disease of the lungs and inward parts, is greatly taken up and used in England, and not without effect. So here you have, by William Harrison, a colloquial account which placed tobacco in England, smoked in a pipe, clearly, a year before the discovery of tobacco in the Virginia colonies in 1574. And that is why we are called 1573. Of course, the account is vastly outdated, apart from the fact that essentially he notes tobacco being smoked in a pipe, because we know that no way can tobacco be used against diseases of the inward parts.
Yes.
And we know that it isn't used with great effect against disease of the lungs. We've got to be honest about this, you know. But it is quite incredible, actually.
So there is a massive relevance to the brand name, and you know, a lot of people sort of watching this video may not be aware of that. So it's great to obviously kind of make sure that everyone is aware of that going forward. But
obviously, you had a good relationship with Nick Melillo, and that's how you became the exclusive distributor for Foundation Cigars. But that's like quite an ambitious thing to do, isn't it? So how did that happen?
Well, in essence, it happened really naturally, really organically. Essentially, we know Nick, and we love his cigars, and we wanted them to come to the UK. So we sat down and we figured out how to do it. And it really is as simple as it sounds, as simple as that. I think, you know, I've got a huge amount of respect for Nick, and I really am very grateful to be working with him. He's a legend in the industry, and he's just a legend as a person. And it's with great honour that we do it, essentially.
Yeah, I think I'd love to meet him.
yeah, I definitely would. I mean, his sort of backstory that you've explained to us previously is quite something special, with him kind of bringing in the CT broadleaf and everything like that. Something quite special of how he's kind of gone from Drew Estate and kind of built up his own brand, called it Foundation, and managed to bring that over into the UK and kind of build this brand on a marketing budget of absolutely nothing. I mean, that takes some doing. And, you know, hats off to him, and you know, the product that he creates and you all create in your own essence is tip top. And again, just hats off. I think there's something special.
I think the no marketing side as well. That's incredible. Like, you don't hear about many brands or companies in general that can do that without marketing. And it's gotten so popular to the point where even Joe Rogan had featured Foundation on the podcast. You know, and Nick had blended a special cigar for Joe Rogan. Which is, that's mind blowing.
It is something.
It's pretty crazy,
special.
isn't it? It's pretty crazy. I think it's Nick's story, really, that the cigars themselves speak for themselves, right? And when you said it, when anything gains traction through word of mouth, that is what happens. The cigars really just spoke for themselves. His story, absolutely incredible. And I know for a fact that when he started the brand in 2015, after he left Drew Estate, where he was head blender, he blended all of the cigars for Drew Estate between 2003 and 2014. And he ran the factory, set up the factory and so forth. I know that when he left there and started Foundation, he essentially went around giving the cigar to people. It was the El Wenze Lancero. Well, no, sorry, the El Wenze, I think it was in the Toro size at the first time. And he went around telling his story while people smoked the cigar. And that's how it happened. it's quite amazing.
It is amazing.
It's a very organic way to start the brand as well, and as I say, hats off to him for being able to actually pull it off, because as Lewis mentioned, it's unheard of. Having no marketing budget and kind of taking something from the roots up to something that it is today. You know, it's now sort of in the UK, it's in the US. Everyone that enjoys these cigars are really enjoying them.
Yeah,
They're a go-to cigar for certain people now.
yeah,
And that to me is just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
it is, and it's testament to Nick's blending as much as anything, because his whole ethos is really, and he's quite unique in that sense. His whole ethos is balance. So every leaf, every tiny component of that cigar, every aspect of it has been thought through, if you like, carefully painted into the cigar to create this beautiful picture. You know, this beautiful picture of balance. It is like standing back from a painting. You look closer and you've got each brush mark, but then as you stand back, each brush mark comes into place. And that's the way he thinks of things. It's genius.
Yeah.
Absolute genius.
It's very unique as well. It is amazing.
It is, yeah. So what's Nick's vision behind the brand? What is he doing differently? Because obviously we've mentioned a little bit about the CT, broadleaf.
Yeah.
So is that something that's unique to Foundation?
It's certainly not unique to Foundation, I will say, but in the industry, Nick Melillo is known as the chief of broadleaf.
It's a cool nickname.
Yeah, it's good, right? It's good. It's not a nickname you give yourself. That is a nickname that's given to you. So his work with Connecticut broadleaf is phenomenal. His work with all broadleaf farmers to keep it going really is actually quite incredible. And his whole sort of ethos is to, in a way, just create cigars with that intense passion, but intense passion for the tobacco itself. You know, you can have intense passion for a brand, you can have intense passion for many different aspects of the cigar. There's always something that will spearhead that point. But for Nick, it's the tobacco itself. And that is really beautiful in a way, because it goes all the way back to the very roots, the very sort of seed, if you like, of the idea itself.
Yeah. Takes you back to the beginning, essentially.
Yeah.
And his passion, you know, for a lot of brands and a lot of suppliers or anything like that, the passion for the cigar itself is the main forefront. But as you say, for him, it goes right down to the roots of the tobacco, and the Connecticut broadleaf in particular is something that he sort of specialises in, as you mentioned. His passion for that is unheard of. You know, people are able to, you know, appreciate the cigar as a whole, but don't necessarily think about the things that go into the, as you say, the roots and the upkeep of the plants and things like that. So, you know, for him to look at that and think, I'm going to perfect this specific thing, that then builds the brand even further. Because again, I mean, the cigar, the Tabernacle Toro is immaculate, and that is again used that tobacco leaf on the wrapper of this one.
It is. A single leaf is only a small sum of the whole, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. By thinking of it as single leaves, really what you're doing is creating a carefully constructed whole as a work of art. You know, I think really is, you know, a big part of his ethos is he uses. He's renowned in the industry for sourcing the highest quality tobaccos in the world. He has been for quite some time. And something he also does, he uses quite unusual tobaccos and gives very specific reason for that. You know, if you take, for instance, on the Wise Man Robusto, he uses the Mexican San Andreas wrapper. Now, that's not unusual by any means, but it was when he started using it. So if you take, for instance, the fact that it was Nick Melillo that introduced Mexican San Andreas tobacco to Nicaragua, as used with on that Wise Man Robusto. It wasn't unusual. It isn't unusual to use it nowadays by any means. It's one of the most widely used wrappers in the world. But at the time, no one was using it because it wasn't viable for premium cigars.
Okay.
So it's genius. What he did was he thought, why don't we use Mexican tobacco in Nicaragua? And he went there and he realised that actually the bales the tobacco was being fermented in were the wrong size. And it just wasn't coming out right. So all he did was he worked with the farmers in Mexico and he worked with producers in Nicaragua to actually change the way the tobacco is fermented. And then that produced San Andreas. And that's quite beautiful, that's quite amazing.
So he's a trendsetter, and he fixed the issue.
Yeah, he did.
That's what I mean, his brain must work in specific ways to be able to think, okay, well this is how it's being done, we're going to slightly tweak it,
Yeah.
and then it brings out this massive thing. And as you say, many people and many brands are now using that specific tobacco plant across all of their sort of brand and cigars.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It really is. How many blends are there behind their portfolio, and how many can we see in the UK?
Well, in the UK here, there are quite a few blends coming out of Foundation. What I really like is if you look at any of the blends, they're not saying Foundation too loud on the front. You know, the Foundation is actually written underneath the band, which is quite nice.
Yeah, that was something that we noticed in the video that we did when we took the bands off and you've got the label. That was another sort of touch of...
It feels more personal.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Extra. You know.
It's sort of not in your face, but it's like we're responsible for this kind of thing. It's a subtle reminder that Foundation are the reason that you are smoking these cigars and enjoying these cigars on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and in the UK, here we have obviously the Tabernacle Toro, this cigar right here. We have the El Buense Lancero. We have the Wise Man Robusto. The Charter Oak in broadleaf, Charter Oak broadleaf in the Lonsdale and the Toro. And you'll still see a few Highclere Castle Senator lying around the Egyptian box.
Okay.
So yeah. But they're all quite incredible lines. We specifically chose those lines for a reason and those sizes. When I discovered Foundation hold a really close place in my heart because once upon a time I only smoked Cuban cigars.
As did I.
Yeah. I mean, like, essentially, it's the way many people smoke, and that's the nature of taste. But I would turn up my nose at anything Nicaraguan, right? Until one day someone gave me a cigar. And I thought, it's Nicaraguan, but I really want a cigar. So I'll smoke this cigar. So I went for a walk through the park. I remember really clearly. I went for a walk through the park. I think it was actually in St James's Square in London. And I lit this cigar and I smoked this cigar and my whole world changed. Because I actually really enjoyed this cigar. It was the first Nicaraguan cigar I'd ever really enjoyed. And that cigar was the El Buense. It's actually the El Buense Lancero. And that's partly why that comes into the UK, because it holds such a great place, to me. And, by all intents, my tastes are very British in that sense. So it is a cigar that should be on British soil. And every sort of Foundation line that comes into the UK has a little story like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it's got the power to change your whole outlook on cigars, I mean, it's got to be something quite special, right?
Yeah.
If you're, only ever going to Cuban cigars and you think, I can't really smoke that, it's not Cuban. If you then give it a go and it's kind of one of them things that stand out to you, and by the looks of it, it's changed your outlook on that completely. I mean, I can understand why you're so sort of passionate about these cigars and Foundation as a whole.
Yeah. It really, it changed my world. I would say every cigar has its merit, no matter where it's from, no matter what cigar it is. Every cigar has its merit. But for me, Foundation, I've been consistently, before I worked at Foundation for years, I was consistently blown away by each cigar. And so that is why we've chosen those specific lines to come into the UK.
It's wonderful, it really is. So obviously today we are currently thoroughly enjoying the Tabernacle. So what's the story behind this blend?
All right. So this cigar right here is quite an amazing blend. you've obviously got, that is the best Connecticut broadleaf wrapper you can get in the world, from the chief of broadleaf himself. Underneath that you have a Mexican San Andreas binder, which Nick helped create himself, of course. And then the filler, you're looking at tobaccos from Nicaragua, various places, Ometepe, for instance, and the Jamastran Valley in Honduras. And each of those pieces have a very specific part in the blend. But really the crowning glory is that Connecticut broadleaf wrapper. And to understand Connecticut broadleaf, you have to go back to the end of the last ice age.
Okay.
Long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I can barely remember it. It's a really ancient tobacco. It's the native tobacco of Connecticut in a way. And the word Connecticut itself means alongside the great tidal river, a Mohican word. But where does that tidal river come from? The end of the last ice age, there was a huge glacier above Connecticut, and the glacial runoff created a finger lake. And as this finger lake drained, it created a river, and the Connecticut River Valley. And really, most importantly, it left behind a layer of sandy loam soils and silt, a layer of topsoil which is unique in the tobacco growing world. It's quite a loose soil. Usually tobacco grows in really hard soils, volcanic soils, clay. This is loose, and it's really deep, that topsoil. You know, it's all up to 10 feet deep. So what Connecticut broadleaf has to do, and what makes it so unique, is that the root system has to go all the way through that topsoil, right? And that makes the plant really short, really squat. Only 4 feet tall, 5 feet tall, compared to 8 or 9 feet tall, you know, the usual sun-grown plants. And the leaves are incredibly long and wide and brimming with oils, sugar and minerals. It has the highest sugar content of any cigar tobacco, a higher sugar content than any other form of cigar tobacco. And that's because the deeper the roots, the sweeter the leaf.
Okay.
Awesome.
And what that does to the blend is phenomenal. The wrapper leaf is only going to be a very small percentage of the actual blend itself. But really what it does is like frosting a glass. If you frost a glass, that's only a tiny percentage of that drink, but it has a huge impact on the flavour, because that is the bit that hits your immediate palate.
Yeah.
And it's the same for wrapper leaf. And what this does, that Connecticut broadleaf, it brings that lovely natural sweetness along the sides of the palate. And then you've got that sort of chocolatey sweetness from the San Andreas also bleeding into that, melding into your palate. Now those Nicaraguan tobaccos, they're unusual Nicaraguan tobaccos. They bring that buttery intensity, you know. It's a strong cigar, but it's not overwhelming at any one point.
No.
In fact, it's been said to me that really it's the perfect cigar to introduce someone to full-bodied cigars with. In that sense, it's not overwhelming.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would definitely agree that it's got some strength, but it's not, as you say, overwhelming. It's not really going to kick you in the teeth too much. It's kind of one of them ones that are kind of, if you can say it in the same instance, it's an easygoing, full strength cigar.
Yeah.
Very enjoyable.
Yeah.
You know, if you're used to sort of medium strength cigars, you could definitely pick one of these up and sort of introduce yourself, as you say. 100%.
Yeah.
And the sweetness coming off the wrapper is impeccable.
Lovely.
There's absolutely. I think that also comes from that sense of balance, right? I've just thought about that briefly. It comes from that sense of every part of the blend has been thought through. Really, it's a full cigar. It's a secondary point. The first point is that this blend has been created to create that flavour profile, and it's ended up as a full-bodied cigar.
Okay.
You know.
So there was no sort of ideal idea of how strong the cigar was going to be. It was kind of, we're going to make this work with these sort of tobacco leaves, things like that, and then, as you say, it's come as a secondary that it's just so happened that it's sort of a full-bodied cigar?
Well, I can't personally sort of vouch for that.
Okay.
Because I didn't blend the cigar. I wish I did. I really wish I did. But I know that the way Nick works with the tobaccos, these things have all come together to create that specific flavour profile. It so happens that that specific flavour profile is a full-bodied flavour profile, but it's come together to create that sort of a sensation on the palate, if you like.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's a very different way to look at it, I suppose. But
Yeah.
I mean, the flavour profiles on each and every Foundation cigar that I've actually sampled is exceptional. It's very good. And if that's his forefront, his idea is I want this flavour profile. Sorry, I think so far he's hit it on the head every single time.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's consistent throughout every single one that you smoke as well.
Yeah.
Every single cigar that you enjoy is consistently the construction, the flavour profile, everything is always perfect.
Yeah, they're amazing. The construction's incredible, actually, isn't it? They're made at the AJ Fernandez factory in Nicaragua, and obviously he's an old friend of Nick's, and so the care that goes into Foundation specifically is incredible. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it really is. So, what can we see in future from Foundation, and what can we see in future from 1573? I know that a lot of companies can't say too much, so I completely understand that.
Secrecy in some aspects, I imagine.
But it's always worth an ask.
Yeah, 100%. We've got to try and.
Yeah, you don't ask, you don't know.
Exactly.
So Foundation, Nick's always coming out with new blends. Foundation are always coming out with new blends and exciting new brands and so forth. We will be seeing a lot more Foundation lines coming into the UK. We are fairly tireless at 1573, and we want to see the cigars that should be here.
Yes.
Essentially. We do have quite a few huge projects coming up with 1573 that I wish I could speak about, and I really can't wait to speak about.
Yeah.
Yeah, but ultimately, really, what's running throughout is the fact that we're going to continue sort of spreading the word and introducing Foundation and helping nurture that sort of love for the brand. You know, it is a legendary cult brand, and I'm just really grateful to get to speak to people like yourselves every day, you know. So,
well, we definitely look forward to these big projects that are coming up, and we, as you say, cannot wait.
Yeah, 100%.
thank you.
But yes, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure just to hear your story, your knowledge, your passion behind the whole thing. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me and Billy today.
It's always a pleasure to sit down with yourself and sort of enjoy a cigar and have these conversations. It's one of these things that we sort of cherish in our day to day.
Likewise, it's always a genuine honour to come and see you. It's always exciting to come and see you.
Yes.
And thank you so much for having me here today.
No problem at all.
You're both legends.
Thank
So
you very
thank
much.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to stick around to watch more content, subscribe to the channel and be sure to like the video. It really is appreciated. But as always, stay safe and happy herfing. Peace.